Is the Mecca Agreement that was signed on the 7th of August between Turkey, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia the beginning of a new defense pact for the region that reduces America's influence and power, not just in the region, but beyond that? Middle Eastern countries are beginning now to think of new arrangements for their defense. We have reports that Pakistan and Kuwait are discussing expanding their defense pact, and even Kuwait, Bahrain, and Jordan are pursuing defense partnerships with Pakistan. Now, since the 70s, so over 50 years, the US was the exclusive supplier of defense to the Gulf countries, being Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, UAE, not just supplying weapons, but having US bases in those regions where some of those countries actually pay for the US to have the US bases in there. And the idea is that having US base means the US is invested, and therefore, if there's an attack, then US would defend them. In exchange for that security and the promise of defense, those countries, the Gulf countries, agreed that they will sell their oil in dollars, which would mean that countries all around the world, if they need oil, they need to have dollars so that when the US prints money, the dollar isn't devalued that much because there's still a high demand for dollar to buy oil. But following the Iran war, everyone has woken up to the fact that, one, the US is more interested in defending Israel than the Gulf countries, where it has deployed most of their defense capabilities and the interceptor missiles that shoot ballistic missiles to Israel. So much so that the US has used more of its interceptors defending Israel than Israel has used its interceptors to defend Israel. That's insanity. Number two, the US doesn't have enough interceptors, which meant that the US couldn't even defend its own US bases from Iranian attacks. We see most of the US bases damaged, some beyond repair in the Gulf countries. And three, the US can't even produce those interceptors quickly enough. And so it's resulting in those countries going to other countries trying to buy weapons, such as when the UAE went to Italy, buying interceptors from them because the US didn't have enough to supply. And four, the US isn't really interested in the stability of the region, as we saw with this Iran war. It's focused on China. How do we defeat China and cut its oil supply, such as what they did with Venezuela and what they're trying to do with Iran, the sanctions on Russia, but also, of course, Israel goes above any of the Gulf countries. And the Gulf countries are now waking up to this fact that the US isn't going to provide security, that the US isn't going to provide stability to the region, which has resulted in the Mecca Agreement between Turkey, which has one of the biggest armies and is part of NATO, Saudi Arabia, which can provide the financial power to this pact, and Pakistan, which is a nuclear country, but also has very strong defense capability because it's supported by China. A lot of the equipment that Pakistan has comes from China, whereas for Turkey, a lot of it comes from the US. So a lot of people think that this defense pact is targeting Iran, when the reality is that Pakistan and Iran are very, very strong allies. Not only is 20% of Pakistan Shia, same as Iran, but they obviously share a border. They're trying to grow their trade from 10 billion to 100 billion. Pakistan is part of the Road Belt Initiative, which is the supply of goods from China all the way across to Iran and up to Eastern Europe and to Western Russia. So it avoids the naval passage, which is mainly controlled by the US. Turkey is also bordering Iran and is a very, very strong ally of Iran. In fact, one of the reasons why the Kurds weren't pushed as hard to attack Iran as seems to be the plan at the beginning was because Erdogan of Turkey said, hey, we're not going to allow this because for Turkey, creating Kurdistan a country for the Kurdish people is a national security threat. And so apparently it was Turkey who put a stop to that and said that we will fight the Kurds if they went ahead with this. Saudi Arabia does have friction with Iran, but I think they're coming to the realization that there's not going to be any regime change in Iran. That is a failed strategy, a failed story. Iran is here to stay. It is a big country and a powerful country. And even after 47 years of economic sanctions applied by the US, it's still there. And in fact, the support for the Iranian government is going stronger because of this war. So they have to make peace with Iran. No, this pact is not targeting Iran. It's more likely to actually be targeting Israel. Now, why do I say Israel? Well, Israel has come out, a lot of the political class in Israel has come out and said that after Iran, the biggest threat that we're going to have to deal with is Turkey. In fact, this week we saw Israel attack a Turkish assets in Syria, sending a signal to Turkey saying, we're not going to allow you to grow your bases in Syria. And they've also said that the biggest threat is also Pakistan. Now, Turkey has the biggest army. Pakistan is a nuclear country. So for them, for Israel, those are the biggest threats. Now, most people say that, well, Turkey's part of NATO. So, if Israel attacks Turkey, then NATO and America is going to defend Turkey. I don't think so. I don't think the U.S. is going to attack Israel in defense of Turkey. That's never going to pass. Congress will never allow that. So Turkey is making other arrangements for protection. And the reality of things is not that they think that they're going to go to war with Israel. It's just to act as a deterrent, to say, hey, an attack on one is an attack on everyone else. And so don't even try it. But we're seeing Israel try it. And we don't know the outcome of that. But this defense pact, this Mecca Agreement, is very unlikely to be just those three countries. It's very likely to include Bahrain, which would be a big hit for the U.S. because one of the biggest bases is in Bahrain, the naval fleet. The 5th Naval Fleet. It will likely also include Kuwait. Again, the U.S. has a big base in there. It's unclear about Qatar. Maybe the U.S. has one of the, in fact, I think the biggest base in the Gulf countries is in Qatar, Al Udeid base. And there are reports that they've invited someone else to this pact. Iran is reportedly invited to join the Mecca defense plans, official claims ahead of Munir's visit to Iran. This claim was made by Mehdi Rahimi, head of the Iranian parliament's Khan-e-Millet, made the claim during an interview with Iranian news outlet El Mayadeen on Saturday. If this is true, and it's a big if, that is huge, and that's confirmation that this pact isn't targeting Iran. Now, for there to be stability and security in the Middle East, in the Gulf countries, in West Asia, Iran has to be part of this new security arrangement. Now, what does this all mean? It means essentially that, one, the U.S. will not have the power to bully a lot of those countries like before because they have other arrangements. Now, not to say that the U.S. bases are going to go away or that those countries are not going to rely on anything to do with, U.S. weapon supply. But before, it was exclusively the U.S. More than 90% in some cases, exclusively in other cases. And now they're kind of diversifying, they're hedging themselves to have other security arrangements. So when the U.S. comes and says, hey, if you don't do this, we're going to stop our supply or we're not going to provide security, well, at least those countries have other arrangements. Or if Israel does something, those countries know for a fact that the U.S. isn't going to come to their defense against Israel. And so the U.S. loses that power. That's number one. So it loses its influence. Number two, those countries might start to diversify how they sell their oil. Now, that is their biggest weapon, really. A weapon that is very risky to use because it might lead to the U.S. actually going to war because of this, because of how dangerous it is for the U.S. to lose the dollar as the reserve currency, which is supported by pegging it to the petrol, i.e. the petrodollars. It won't be able to print money as much as before without really devaluing the dollar. Now, we're seeing some countries start to trade a bit outside of the dollar, but it's not to an extent which causes a risk for the U.S. But we can see more of that now, especially given if Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz, which by controlling the Strait of Hormuz, it could tell people that, hey, if you want faster transit, faster approval, you need to confirm that your goods were bought not in dollar, but in the Chinese currency. That is an attack on the dollar as the reserve currency. That's an attack on the U.S. economy. And number three is the U.S. military is going to lose a lot of money because they sell billions and billions of dollars to the Gulf countries. And if a part of that goes to Pakistan or to China, well, that's a loss of billions to those, the military complex and its influence on, the U.S. essentially. I had Matthew Ho the other day on the channel, and he explained how, why the U.S. goes to war. Essentially saying it's that the military complex funds a lot of these think tanks that create these analysis that the government relies on when it kind of creates its foreign policy. And so if the military complex wants more war, then they fund these think tanks that suggest that war is good, that's easy to create regime change. And also a lot of those people in the military complex then go into government, and then those people in government, when they finish public service, if you can call it that, they go into the military complex to work. So there's a very strong relationship between the government and the military complex, and the ability for the military complex to influence what the government does when it comes to its foreign policy. To some extent, the military complex vets certain candidates for roles in the government through their influence and alliances with certain political institutions and political individuals. And so if the military complex power is reduced, that is going to change the foreign policy in the US. That might take 10 more years, but that is the trajectory that we're heading towards. So to summarize, the Mecca Agreement is not yet a replacement for the American security umbrella that is present in the Middle East, but things to watch out, but we're heading towards that direction where the US is losing its exclusivity of supplying defense and military towards the Gulf countries. What things that we need to watch is any news or confirmation that Bahrain or Kuwait have either kind of entered into a defense pact with Pakistan or joined into the Mecca Agreement. And also whether Iran is going to join the Mecca Agreement, which would be a huge kind of confirmation that the Mecca Agreement is obviously not targeting Iran, but targeting another country. And this would be a huge failure of the Trump administration. And, once countries start to make other arrangements and other countries see that they're successful, well, that's a snowball effect that will lead to other countries making other arrangements, especially when you have Trump saying that, we're not going to do any defense exercises with South Korea because I don't want to, make issues with North Korea. Other countries are going to look at that and, the confidence they have in the U.S. is going to be massively diminished. We'd love to know your thoughts about what you think this defense pact is all about. Who is it targeting? And is this really the start of the downfall of the U.S. military power and influence in the Gulf countries and West Asia? Thank you for watching this video. If you did like the video, please subscribe and hit the like button, and we'll see you very soon.